Welcome everybody to the InPower Coffee Break. This is where we take half an hour every Tuesday at 1 o'clock and sit down with something warm if it's cold outside or cool if it's warm outside, and talk about things that matter. And our topics on InPower Coaching and InPower Women tend to cover a wide variety from women in the workplace issues to workplace issues, and that's what we'll be discussing today, to how do you survive and thrive in your workplace and in your life. So today we have with us Mary Schaefer, who is with reimaginework.com. She's a speaker and an author and a good friend. And she's going to be talking about the pro-human workplace that we all would like to work in. And I'd also like to introduce Mary Brodie, who's running the InPower Women channel today. So before we jump into the questions, Mary Brodie, would you like to introduce Mary Schaefer?
Yes. So I was working with Mary on her bio, and she sent over the update, Dana. So I like the new bio, Mary, by the way. So I'll read it out. You might have experienced a time when it seemed like you were a cog in a machine at work versus a human being. You might have even heard the term pro-employee workplace and wondered how it applied to you. What if we shifted that to think about a pro-human workplace? And this is something Mary Schaefer has dreamed of and worked for her entire career. Mary has a master's degree in human resources and is certified as a professional in human resources. She lives and teaches empowerment and how to have productive manager-employee interactions. As a speaker, coach, and trainer, she focuses on making the most of what human resources can contribute to an organization through their energy and creativity, while at the same time meeting their own specific needs for meaningful work. In our discussion today, we'll talk about what it takes to revolutionize your workplace to be pro-human.
Awesome. One admin comment before we dive into talking to Mary, and that is that we have the chat bar going on, so feel free to chime in with your thoughts or questions via chat. And also we have an open seat today, so if you want to join us via video and join the conversation in a few minutes when we invite you in to do that, go ahead and click call in. I think we already have one caller waiting, so we'll get to that portion of the conversation really quickly. So, but before we kind of open up the conversation, Mary, you know, you and I have talked for a long time about many things related to how organizations function, what's a healthy culture, what's not a healthy culture. And I love this idea of pro-human, a pro-human workplace. I have always thought of it as kind of a pro-employee workplace, but you talk about humanity, which is certainly something I think most of us want in our workplace environments. So why don't you quickly just explain to us, what does it mean for a workplace to be pro-human?
It's a great question, Dana, and I get it all the time, and it's interesting. I talk about how I want us to treat each other at work humanly, and it gets fed back to me as humanely, which to me means water fountains and bathroom breaks. But humanly, having a pro-human workplace to me means we acknowledge the humanity in each other, that we're actually dealing with another human being. Mary, when you read my bio, I almost wanted to put this in, but I thought it would make it too wordy. You know, we talk about human resources at work, not the department, but our human resources. I like to refer to them as human beings who happen to be employees, to remind us that employees are human beings. And what I mean by that is that very human needs are met. For instance, it's amazing to me, I used to work at a chemical plant, and how much effort we would put into maintaining equipment and, you know, high-priced equipment, lab equipment, etc. And we also have these very valuable assets as human beings, yet we don't seem to give those human beings what is needed for them to maintain themselves, to perform in a excellent manner, and those needs being the need, and I focus on the need for appreciation, the need for belonging, and the need for making a meaningful contribution. And so a pro-human workplace to me means thinking about those things in everything you do. I don't care what the what is, it's the how.
So I want to pick on something that you wrote in your blog post about this, because when you're talking about humanity in a way that some people read, and I'm talking about people who run organizations, they read this to be, oh, but those parts of the human being, it's not our job to worry about, right? Someone's motivation, someone's drive, are they fulfilled in their work? It's like, no, I'm giving them money, so they're here to do a job. And that attitude has been documented in a lot of ways. It's not just us experiencing that in a workplace or two. But you talked about a study I love the title, Firms of Endearment, that actually talked about no, if we treat people as human, we actually get better business results. Because I think that's what a lot of people just don't believe. They want to believe it, but they don't believe it. So can you talk more about those studies?
Yes. And that's a hot button for me, actually, Dana, because, I've had, particularly when I was still in corporate America as an employee, I would have, when I was trying to pitch something, justify this for me. The data's been out there a long time, and people are continuing to do more studies and have more modern sets of data. And I'm going to read these numbers because I want to get this right. I referred to the book Firms of Endearment by Raj Sisodia, who also wrote Conscious Capitalism with John Mackey, who's the CEO of Whole Foods. Raj says what he considers firms of endearment and has identified several of them. Those that are publicly held returned 1,026% for investors over a 10-year period in the recent past. Compare that with 122% for the S&P 500. That's nearly 10 times as much return to investors. And to me, how can we afford not to do this? And, you and I could have a whole nother coffee break about why I think that is. But
let's do that.
Yeah. But it is worth a lot. And to just quote another study, Gallup says it's worth $450 to $550 billion a year, billion with a B, because of unskilled and unqualified managers are eroding employee engagement, for lack of a better word. And I connect that to the pro-human workplace.
Yeah, actually, you're hitting on something else which we've talked about before, and that is that when it comes to cultural health inside a company, most people believe it's top down, and in fact, change, is certainly initiated usually and sustained through top down support. But it's the people in the middle that have been shown to either make the shift and the change or not make the shift and the change, or to have, another way of saying that is that people in the middle are the people who really dictate how the culture works. And if you don't have a pro-employee and pro-human environment, it's the people in the middle whose behaviors, need to evolve so that people aren't quitting the manager while they're quitting the company also, which is also something that we hear a lot, that people don't quit companies, they quit people, they quit managers.
Right.
So let me invite Priyanka into the conversation. I have some other questions here, but I'm interested in knowing what Priyanka has to say and what you'd like to know.
Hi, Priyanka.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Hi, Dana.
Hi. So just for those Mary may not know, Priyanka is one of our loyal fans and followers. She's even written on the site and maybe writing more on the site. So she's a student of leadership, which is one of the things we appreciate about what she brings to the conversation.
Thanks to Dana.
So Priyanka, remind us where you work and what your role is, and then let's see what questions you have for Mary.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Priyanka Chawla, and I work for the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. We are the special advisors to the U.S. government, chartered by Abraham Lincoln. And I lead the technology and web strategy for the Life Sciences Division. It's one of the 6 divisions of the academies. And I'm focused on using technology as an enabler to serve our business needs. And Dana's resources have been awesome. Especially, she focuses on how do you improve your voice as a women leader and how do you navigate your career path, which I found really helpful. So thank you so much, Dana.
You're welcome.
And you know what, interestingly, I'm glad Mary brought this point up. I can't just listen. This is the book that I'm reading right now, so this is right by my desk. And it's interesting where the book focuses on the different stakeholders that are involved in the process. It's not just about maximizing profit. It's about how you treat people. And that's something that I've learned in my personal experience as well. It's about people who take the trash out of your building because it aligns with the mission of the organization and they're doing their part, which means you have to acknowledge them. My question to you, Mary, is, especially when you're working for, say, a nonprofit, the key performance indicators are different. Probably a corporate company has a specific way of handling people. What advice would you have for a nonprofit like ours in terms of how to continue treating people more as not just scientists or researchers, but more on the pro-human level? I would love to hear your thoughts on those lines.
Mm-hmm. And so, Priyanka, what I would say is that you would not be attracted to Dana's work and even this discussion today if you didn't get pro-human at some level. And so how do you think that you apply that on a regular basis in your particular work environment?
Sure, and this is something that I've learned from the bosses that I've worked with. It's all about how you treat people and treating them when you don't need them, because that takes you a long way. Like, for example, I've been working on a very strategic project that's of a time-sensitive deadline, and I had to pull different people from various parts of my institution. It's because of the relationships that I've nurtured for the last several years. People just chimed in and they said, hey, I need to help Priyanka. And that's what really mattered. And these are people that I don't really work on a regular basis, but these are people that I've nurtured these relationships. And maybe it's just the nice warmth and hospitality that I've shared with them, the bonds that I've had with them for several years that made me feel that way, that I can actually count on them.
That's a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that, because I coach managers a lot and talk to them about talking to their employees regularly. A lot of times they say, I don't know what to talk to them about if it's not like about a task, or their performance or whatever. And, I have a post about that still keeps things within the context of work. For instance, how were you encouraged today? What was your favorite thing you did today or this week? In a way to learn about people. And I think what you described, Priyanka, was so brilliant because you acknowledged people, which that's very important to me. I think as human beings, it's important for us to feel seen. And there are so many people we encounter every day that feel invisible. And just simply in our workplace, acknowledging people we wouldn't have to, as you put it, acknowledging those people, and in a sincere way. I'm not suggesting being disingenuous because you plan to use them later, but if it's in your heart to do that, and it goes such a long way, as you said, when you need someone or need them, how people will pitch in simply because you acknowledge that they were another human being in your workplace.
Actually, let me chime in with something that I learned in my career, struggling with the question or the issue that you identified, Mary, which it seems like Priyanka's doing very naturally. It didn't come as naturally to me always to want to know personally about the people that were working for me. And when I noticed this, it was because I had little kids. I really wasn't planning to be in the office very much any more than I had to be. So they want to go out and they want to have drinks after work and softball team. And I'm like, hey, I got kids and, I'd rather be with my family than with you. And so I struggled with this question, how will I get to know these people when I'm really only here for the business? And that was kind of surprising to me because I'm a people person, but I really, really wanted to confine my people time. And what I found was that the thing that worked best for me and for them was I was their manager. I needed to understand how they wanted to grow and develop, what was important to them in the work, so that I could, give them assignments that they were going to be more motivated about, or I would give them in a way they'd be more motivated about, or that I could mentor them and help them. So when I started, trying to get to know them, not like, hey, what kind of beer do you like to drink?
Right.
But, or what's your favorite sport, which was not interesting to me in that context. But I wanted to learn more about them in terms of their career development. Boy, did they open up. And what I learned from that was both that I could help them develop, but also that everybody wants to talk about themselves. So if you can just figure out what you want to know, what you really want to know about them and ask them, that's where it starts from. So when the manager goes, how do I get these people into a conversation about subjects they care about and I don't? Well, find the subjects you care about and they care about.
Yes.
And build on that.
Yes. And I'll Mary Brodie, I'll send you some links to some articles I have written about that, because to your point, Dana, I've gotten pushback from managers like, I don't want to know them. And I'm like, hold up. We don't have to talk about what they do outside of work. When I use the word humanly, people, HR people included, feedback to me, gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to have a TMI conversation, or we're going to be all in puddles on the floor. No, I'm not talking about that. We can still do this in an appropriate way in the context of an organization.
Yeah, and I wanted you to elaborate on something else that you wrote about in the blog about this topic, which was about a technique that you called making them right. Which plays into something I believe really strongly in. Can you talk about that? So you're a manager, you want to be pro-human, right? Yep. You may not know what that means, but you can make them right. What does that mean?
Oh gosh, I love that one so much. I'm a little bit of a weirdo and a geek about this. I like to be challenged. And I gave a story in the blog post, but yet another example I have is that I was chartered with delivering with a co-facilitator some training that mostly nobody wanted to go to. Okay, but they needed this specific training, and I decided to use a technique. I would go around the room and I would ask them what they heard about the training, like heard from other people. So that would give them permission to tell me what they thought, but blame it on somebody else, right? And so I would get stuff like, I heard this is the most boring thing. I heard this is a big waste of time, and the kind of things. And I was at a chemical plant, and there was a culture of employees would test you with that kind of stuff. See what you're made of. Can you handle me? And so they'd say, oh, this is so boring. Here's a waste of time. Thank you for telling me that. I hope to prove that person wrong by the end of this 4 hours, and just thank them and tell them I appreciate that feedback. You will see politicians use this a lot. I'm really glad you asked that question, but it also gives you a time to collect your thoughts. For instance, an employee comes up to you and says, gosh, that announcement that came out today, that decision, that was so unfair. Tell me what you mean by that, rather than get defensive and tell them why it's fair, and people I find them often really surprised when I engage them in that way. And often the defensiveness or aggressiveness dissipates. In fact, I remember being in front of a group talking about how benefits were going to change, and a guy in the audience came at me really, really hard. And I said, tell me more specifics about what you were talking about, or you and I can meet later, in my office and talk about it. And he's like, no, that's okay. It's like, me taking him seriously, it's almost like he just wanted to get frustration out, and I allowed him to, and then he was done. So it's sort of magical to me, actually.
And you know what? I mean, I want to highlight something you said before, because I think it's so interesting. I think the dynamic going on in there, this is my InPower view of it. Like you said, we all want to be seen. And part of wanting to be seen, what does that really mean? Well, we want to be treated with respect for who we are and that we are a human being, right? And unconsciously, when we get negative and, we push back and we don't acknowledge what the other person said, that person doesn't feel seen. So to your point, when you make them right from the standpoint of, hey, there's something of validity that you just said. That's 90%, maybe not 90%, but that's a lot of what people want. And so creating a pro-human environment, whether it's in a relationship or in a team or in an organization, in a lot of ways is allowing people to be seen, to treat everybody with respect without, having to make everybody right and wrong right away. And that, like you're saying, it feels magical. It can feel magical for those people who've never been in an environment that's like that, that just kind of automatically gives what you say some level of credibility simply because you said it.
Right.
Can be really powerful. Something else I wanted to bring up, and I'm curious also about, Priyanka, your view of this. There's this term, well, don't take it personally. This is just business, right? And this dichotomy between business and personal, we talked about a little bit, like the HR people going, oh my God, am I going to get too much TMI here? And to me, this is really important because we can't take everything in the business environment personally, or we'll just wither up and die, right? I mean, because we aren't our most sensitive selves in the work environment, in part because we have things we have to do, and that's legitimate. That's why the business exists. So we can't take everything too personally. On the other hand, Mary, when I read you talk about this, it makes me think that, we need to remember that even though we're not taking everything personally, we are personal. So how do you both kind of see the balance of business versus personal? How do you walk it in your own life?
What I would say about that, Dana, is sometimes I get a little edgy. And particularly when I was in my corporate job and managers would say, I don't know why they're so upset. It's business, it's not personal. And I'm like, until it happens to you, let's see how you feel about it. But to get to the more practical level of that, business or personal, you're right. We can't take everything personally. And yet I believe as a leader, I have to be aware how someone might take something personally. And it's the how. It means I don't make a decision that impacts someone negatively. It means I go about it and deliver it in a way that still maintains their dignity as a human being. And so I always say people can hear a lot of bad news if you deliver it correctly. And I have had people that I have had to deliver bad news to, and they were even appreciative of me and relatively calm with me, even though they were taking it personally. They also were able to take it because of how I handled it. And so, granted, we as employees can't take everything personally, but we can take things a lot better depending on how it's delivered to us.
Which brings up what you said before, how we do things is as important or more so to how it's received. Priyanka, what's your experience with the whole personal and business balance?
Sure, Dana. I would like to make 2 points here. One is, I'm speaking for the millennial generation here, where we are very young, ambitious. You don't want to hear a no for anything because, whatever you're working on is the best idea on the planet. But then I think it takes a lot of experience that I've seen over the last few years where you become more receptive to hearing no's or trying to go back to the drawing board again to re-experiment on things that you suggested. And I think that's part of business. And if you want to be seen as a leader, you should be open to new ideas and open to rejections. And initially, I felt a little bit of sensitivity in me, but then I learned from other role models, like other leaders that I've seen. I want to be like them. And I looked at the qualities that they have. They're very calm and composed, and they're very graceful when they're taking constructive feedback. So that's something that I've imbibed. And being part of Toastmasters, which is an international public speaking and leadership organization, I've served in several leadership roles. I've been at the receiving end where my speeches were roasted and toasted. And you get used to this experience where it's for your betterment that people are giving you feedback. So that's one aspect of it. The other one is where, as Mary said, when you have these courageous conversations, you have the insulation within you to say, hey, this is not about me, this is about the way business works. But then when you deliver this news to your team members or people who look up to you, we need to figure out the best medium to share that information. And sometimes it's not email, it's not phone conversations, it's in person, right? It's going to their office, finding a way where they're so comfortable, or taking them out for a coffee and saying, hey, here's the challenge and this is what the implications seem to be, and this is how it's going to affect you. And I've found people very receptive when I've had to deal with these challenging conversations. And they appreciate the fact, like Dana pointed out, that a leader steps up and is not running away from the situation, but you're showing up face to face and dealing with it. So those are two examples that I wanted to share. But again, as we all know, it's a learning experience. And every new conversation is so different. And you feel like, I wish I knew this before going into this one.
That's how we learn. Well, I want to bridge into a topic here that comes up for me all the time. Lately, it's been coming up all the time. Like all my clients are dealing with this, which is bully bosses. And I want to bring that up from a couple of different perspectives, including this one about being heard and being seen. Because one of the things about dealing, having people in your work environment where you feel bullied, either directly or indirectly, is that, it's the ultimate not being seen, right? It's the ultimate being treated like trash, like the help, like, whatever. And it really triggers us for that reason. But it also really makes it feel like this is not a pro-human workplace. Bullies drive people out of the workplace a lot. So I'm curious, Mary, from your professional point of view, if you're in an organization, and I had this conversation at a cocktail party the other night, of course, they find out what I would do, and now they want to talk to me, right? And it's an executive who is building in his team as pro-human a culture as he can, but he sees that his peers and some of his superiors, really don't have that philosophy. Matter of fact, they're kind of more bullying. And he really was struggling with that. Like, what do I do? How can I change the culture, which I'm not sure he can by himself. But what advice do you give when this is part of the dynamic and you want to create a pro-human workplace, but you've got bullies in the management structure?
Yeah. Again, that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But
maybe we'll do another coffee break on it.
Yeah, but what I will say is I want to pick up on one thing Priyanka said around receiving feedback, and it's important to get good at that. And I want to bridge that with the bullying you're talking about. Sometimes I've received what I consider really, if the feedback wasn't inappropriate, at least the way it was delivered to me was inappropriate. And I like to have a couple questions in my back pocket that I have found work really well. One is, can you tell me how that impacts my performance when you're feeling like you're getting feedback that doesn't really connect and it's just bullying? As far as the person who spoke to you the other day, and how can that person spread a more pro-human work culture? I find it, unfortunately, unless he can get the higher ups to agree to some sort of project around this, is, it's one at a time. That's what I did as a human resource manager to start working on the organization I served, and particularly working with the staff. And I remember going to one staff member's office after a meeting and talking to him about how I felt undermined by something he said to me in a meeting in front of 5 people. And it was a very difficult conversation. He tried to bait me and anger me, and I was just really solid in what I wanted to convey to him. Do you know he came to me later and apologized, which people told me was unheard of. And so, knowing what you have a right to stand up for and how to say it in a way that doesn't corner a person, practicing that, it goes back to me is you start where you are. You start where you are. That's
good advice. Good. And I will say that I'm getting an echo. I don't know if anybody else is.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are at the end of the time here, and we have to wrap up. But this conversation, I think we should do one on bullying, don't you? I mean, maybe more than one. That's a good topic. And what I want to do is, first of all, thank Mary and Priyanka for being here for this discussion. We raised a lot of interesting topics. To keep talking about it, we have a forum where we talk about these topics and continue the conversation between sessions. And you can always go to coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com to see what's coming up, to register to get reminders right before the shows, so you can see what topic it is and if you want to join in. And we really encourage you to join in, just like Priyanka did today, which was awesome. I'm so glad that you actually turned your video on.
I get a chance to see you all.
That's exactly right. And one thing too, Mary, you said you were going to send some links to Mary. Why don't we put it on the bottom of the post where this recording will go? So anybody that's interested in those links, just go to coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com and then scroll down to this event and then click on it and it'll be there on that post. And I think that's it. If anybody has suggested topics for the future, you can also submit them through the website or through the forum would be even better. And we look forward to continuing to expand this dialogue. And let's get on scheduling some bully conversations.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.